Hi everyone. Welcome to Material Matters, a talk on timber. I'm Sandra, I'm the editor at Denfair. And with us today are designer Adam Markovitz, digital craftsperson Marcus Piper, Luke Ommundson from Evostyle, and Rod Wiles from the American Hardwood Export Council. All wonderfully knowledgeable folk on the topic of timber and design. And each had a part to play in the space. Oak REDefined, just over that direction in the show. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you do after this. We're going to get into the detail of how it was created and the process, how it was developed, and also talk a little bit about the merits of timber. Now, we all know wood is good. We've had almost a primal connection to it since day one. Building a house in the Stone Age, your options are trees, grass, and rocks. Fast forward 2.5 million years, and we've supercharged the stuff. From coasters to furniture to cross-laminated timber buildings, 18 stories high, I think is the tallest one, to the finely crafted furniture that you see on the show floor today. And these guys know heaps about it. So I might get you to kick off the introductions yourself, Rod.
Hello everyone, my name is Rod Wiles. I'm with the American Hardwood Export Council, which is a bit of a mouthful. And we've been around for just over 30 years, and our role is to promote American hardwoods worldwide on behalf of the US hardwood industry, which is made up of many hundreds of small, medium-sized family-owned businesses. So we are their marketing arm around the world. And America is the largest exporter of hardwood lumber, timber, in the world. And it goes all over the world. And Australia has been in love with American hardwoods for a long time. And that love keeps on growing, we're very pleased to say.
All right. My name's Adam Markovitz. I'm a designer, architect, and fine furniture maker. And I was invited by the American Hardwoods Export Council to create a space that explored the possibilities of red oak. And I really wanted to use my skills as both architect and fine craftsman to investigate how wood could be used to a fine craft level on an architectural scale.
Hi, my name's Luke. I have a company in Sydney which specialises in solid timber manufacturing, and we were asked by American Hardwood Council to be involved in the production of the timber parts for the stand and the creation of the stand.
That company's called Evostyle, correct?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Marcus Piper. I was responsible for the graphics and working with these guys to promote the American Oak REDefined stand.
Yeah, that neatly sums it up for everyone. The first question I have today is why American red oak? It's not maybe a material that a lot of us have come across, and I'd just like to know, your thoughts about it, Rod.
I think you've answered your own question. It's because it's a material that we haven't, many of us haven't come across. American white oak is very well established in this market, as it is in many other markets around the world, and Europe in particular. And red oak is the other oak, which is an extremely beautiful, versatile species of timber. And, we've always asked the question, why not red oak? And I think there's some confusion, some misperceptions. People think it's red. Well, actually, that's because the name red oak comes from the fact that the leaves turn red in the autumn. It's not the timber, although there can be a little bit of a pinkish hue to it sometimes. But in many ways, it's more versatile than white oak. So here we are saying, look at this stuff. It's gorgeous. Let's give it a go. And I think we're really sort of addressing that thing where, why does somebody use one type of toothpaste? It's because that's the one they've always used. Why do people use white oak? Well, it's the one they've always used here. So let's have a look at something else.
Absolutely. Did you, Adam, maybe want to talk about the experience of working with the red oak?
Yeah, I guess when I was having the initial chat with Rod about the red oak and its various properties, I was kind of, as an architect, you really you think of oak as American oak. There's not really an identity of white oak and red oak in Australia. Most architects don't know that there is actually a division between those two species. So really dialing in and understanding, what are the specific differences between the two species and what are the possibilities. And one of the things that I was really the most interested to get my hands on and play with was this thermally modified red oak, which is up on the screen over there. And it's a really interesting process where they essentially cook the timber all the way through, and it changes the colour. So when you go to our stand, you'll see that there's natural red oak, which is, as you would familiarly recognise it, but the walls that wrap the stand are a lot darker. That's not a different species. It doesn't have a stain on it. It's just been cooked all the way through. And what's really, really interesting about it is that it becomes, you can use it externally. And because it's cooked all the way through, you can just use it like a normal piece of timber. You can cut it, you don't have to stain it. It reveals the colour as you're working it. So really, I had this opportunity to play with this timber and explore it in different ways through the project.
And maybe, Luke, if you could speak to, or Adam, I suppose, being able to, it's one thing to kind of conceptualize it and look at this timber and play with it, but then another thing to be able to realize that vision, I suppose, and I guess that's where you come in, Luke.
Yeah, so as a manufacturer, we're often dictated to what timbers we've got to use, so it was a really good opportunity to explore the benefits of the red oak and get to learn about it. We have used it on some other projects in Australia, mostly furniture products that we've made for a few people, but we hadn't done a lot with the thermally modified oak, so that presented a new challenges and new ways to look at manufacturing and treating it.
And how does it compare to the timbers that you would normally be familiar with using?
Well, funnily enough, the red oak is actually, I would say, machines a lot better than the white oak. It's a lot more forgiving. It doesn't seem to be, I use the term as cranky as white oak can be. If it's, with the grain, it's a lot more consistent. In our business, we also not only do machining and fabricating, we do wood turning, which we find the red oak turns beautifully. Rarely needs much sanding at all. It's easy on the tools. It glues well, and because of its porous nature, it really stains well and consistently.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I think one of the most interesting things I found through this process is stats like this. Rod, maybe you can talk through some of them?
I can, and one of the reasons why we're promoting red oak around the world is because it's actually the most abundant species in the American hardwood forest, and it's roughly 20% of the forest is red oak. And this is a forest which is growing all the time, much faster than it's being harvested. And so the stat there is every 2 minutes the US hardwood forest grows by the size of a football field. That's a soccer field. But I have some other stats, and I've had to write them down because I can't remember them all, but I made a small calculation this morning that every year the red oak resource, not the hardwood resource, the red oak resource increases in size by the equivalent of 700,000 40-foot shipping containers. So just to give you something to visualize, perhaps, this forest is getting bigger, it's getting more healthy, it's actually not being used enough. And the greatest threat to any forest around the world is that it's not used as a forest. It's underutilized and perhaps converted to something else. So we need to use more American hardwoods.
Where are we seeing American hardwoods being used in Australia?
A lot in furniture, architectural joinery, interiors. Australia has, on average, the largest houses in the world, and so we're seeing a lot of timber in houses, and really amazing, beautiful houses. Timber is very much in vogue again. There's a wood renaissance around the world, and we're seeing a lot of American hardwoods complementing Australian native species as well.
Absolutely. Marcus, I'd like to ask you, given all these sort of tactile properties, you're responsible for creating the beautiful Tangram?
Tangrams. Yeah.
Tangram. I nearly said anagram. Tangram sort of puzzle in the center of the installation. Tell me about translating timber in a graphic sense and then sort of pushing it back out as a tactile, playable thing.
Well, it was interesting because I certainly couldn't do exactly what I wanted to do. But I guess that's part of the process of learning. I don't traditionally work in timber, so to take something which was probably more intricate and work through the process of what's possible was quite interesting. The stain was quite a nice touch, and it's actually one of the major things about American red oak is it takes stain really well. There was a project in the UK called the Blushing Bar, which was in Milan, wasn't it? Yeah. And I don't know, can you explain who did it?
This was Sebastian Cox, UK furniture designer maker, commissioned for Wallpaper Handmade in Milan this year. And he decided to force artists' ink into the red oak because it has these pores that run all the way through the timber. And it was an extraordinary procedure that resulted in many failures and a workshop that ended up looking like Sweeney Todd's barbershop. But the end result was fantastic, and it's called the Blushing Bar. Of course, it blushes red. But this is one of the key differences between red oak and white oak, is that white oak, through a process called tyloses, has closed pores, and that's why wine barrels are made of white oak and not red oak. If you made a barrel out of red oak, your wine would end up on the floor.
That's no good. It's no good for anyone. So let's talk about that idea, again, looking at white oak versus red oak, or rather the idea that red oak is not red. We see trends happen all the time, and I think when I think of the furniture of, say, the 90s, it was all stained in a really kind of orangey colour. You know, not wanting to get too far down the trends route, but why is there a vogue for certain colours at certain times? What drives that?
There's a funny thing about Australian timbers, which a lot of them are red or dark, and I think in Australia maybe we have an aversion to that, some kind of weird personal history thing, which doesn't help with red oak, does it?
We're often asked to recommend timbers, and the one thing that people ask is, I don't want any reds, I want the whitest, blondest timber we can get, and that pretty much eliminates every Australian hardwood. And so...
And are they also asking for Australian hardwoods at the same time?
If possible, yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I think, to me what's interesting is that we almost have that idea of this blonde timber look. Does that come from that Scandinavian sensibility, do you think, or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it's possibly to do with a lot of moving into tighter living spaces in an urban area. You know, you've got a lot of people who are used to living in suburbs suddenly moving with urban densification into tighter apartments. So there's the kind of Scandinavian approach to lighter internal spaces and more airy furniture and minimal lines really suits itself, whereas the darker, heavier pieces would tend to make it feel cluttered and smaller than it actually is. So I think that's generated it in part.
I think the combination of the thermally modified being quite dark and the lighter timber that you'll see on the stand, both American red oak, there's a very Japanese sensibility to that, and I know that's part of the design, but the aesthetic, the colour aesthetic is very much Japanese. But the way the timber slats or fins work, it doesn't feel heavy. Even though it's dark, it's light.
Well, let's get into that, the actual process and the sort of construction and inspiration, I guess, behind Oak REDefined. What were those references for you when you were sort of coming together with that idea?
Sure. So I guess when I was originally approached, one of the main differences behind the design was that we're not specifically trying to sell anything. We're trying to educate. So it's a very different feeling when you come into the stand as compared with most of the other stands, which have a product that they're trying to essentially sell you. So we wanted to look at our stand and how we could make it kind of a respite from Den. You know, it's quite a busy, hectic space. There's a lot of people kind of trying to get your attention. There's a lot of, you kind of walk around and it can get quite tiring. So we wanted to create a space that was simultaneously sort of enclosed so that you felt like, you know, somewhat separated from the noise of Den, but still able to perceive what was going on around you. So I really wanted to explore that kind of idea of a sort of semi-permeable enclosure. And then once we had people inside the stand, I wanted to explore different aspects of how timber could be detailed in a way that, you know, felt seamless. So you've got, you know, wireless charging, you've got power points, etc., just all integrated into the design. So, you know, it's a very functional space you could imagine in a library or an office or something like that, but it still feels very calming as a space to be in.
One of the first meetings we had as a team, which wasn't that long ago, was it? We discussed this idea of an exhibition stand where you can do everything you don't normally get to do at a stand, which is sit, work, meet, play, touch, feel, experience the actual thing. And that's the nice thing about timber, because you do actually want to touch it.
Yeah.
And normally when you go to a trade show, it's like, oh no, you can't sit on that, or, you know, room full of chairs but nowhere to sit. So I think that was the real kind of linchpin for the whole stand, was to go against the grain in a way of exhibition stands.
Well, that's all good, because I've called the talk designing with the grain. You're going against the grain now.
See what I did there?
Yeah, you did. I think what struck me about the stand, firstly, is that, you know, when you approach it, you do get those little different perspectives in as you walk around it. It invites you to do that. So it actually, it encourages movement around it and also through it. And I think that's really beautiful, the way that that's been executed. Also, the seats, the way that that's come together, I think that's really, really beautiful. Just the detailing of it. Can we talk a little bit about the combination of the different treatments of the timbers within the space and how you made that decision?
Sure. So I guess initially we were exploring stains, and, you know, some of the initial kind of research that I was doing came up with the blushing bar, and it was quite a colourful space. But when I started to get into it, I really wanted to keep it quite monochrome, and I think because the thermally modified oak and the natural oak are really quite different in feel, but they're still sort of consistent in terms of a palette. They work really well together. So, you know, you've got this contrast of materials, and you walk in there and you have a sense of this is a very kind of consistent, cohesive space, but it's still, you know, the transition, for example, the posts, the vertical posts are all in the natural, whereas all the wedges that hold it together are all in the thermally modified oak. So it's this opportunity to highlight the different elements, but still feel really consistent in terms of a palette.
And was that challenging, Luke, for you to put together and make real?
A little bit, yeah. We had a fairly tight time frame to do it, and you know, we had to source all the timber pretty quickly, which luckily we were able to do. But you know, Adam was, because he has quite a good construction knowledge of furniture, it made it a lot easier. You know, because he sort of understood what we had to go through to make it all work. But really, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
I'd like to examine this idea of timber having quite a warm and, a very human sort of aspect to it. And it ties into that concept of biophilic design. I think you can talk to that, Rod.
I can. I mean, it's, timber is a natural product. We have a natural affinity to timber. Humans and trees are roughly the same in terms of water content. We rely on wood and have done through history for absolutely everything. And in modern times, we've become somewhat disconnected from this wonderful natural material, and there has been also a bit of an aversion to using it because of environmental concerns as well. And the image of a tree being felled is a very emotive image, and some of us can remember Sting strapped to the front of a JCB in the Amazon rainforest, stopping people from cutting down trees.
I don't remember. That.
Sorry, I'm showing my age. Anyway, but really, if wood is sourced from a sustainably managed forest, then it has to be about the most environmentally sensible material that you can use. And actually, that's almost a direct quote from the head of Greenpeace some years ago. So this is a material that we feel a natural connection to, and we ought to really surround ourselves with it. And I think that's what we've done here, or at least attempted to do here at Denfair this year. And I think the other thing that I wanted to mention was that what we're doing with the thermally modified red oak, the dark brown red oak that's on the vertical fins on the outside of the stand, we're taking a temperate, non-durable hardwood with a wonderful environmental backstory, and we're able to use it in a new application, which is outdoors in cladding and decking and outdoor furniture, where often a timber from a tropical rainforest may be used. And so here we're actually able to add to that environmental story, which is great for us, and so there's even more of a connection to it. Yeah.
I love the idea of the marrying between the technological and the timber. Let's sort of unpack that idea of timber in the workplace and how you can marry those two. To anyone, really.
I think one of the interesting, coming back to the process, one of the interesting things about this whole thing, I work predominantly in the digital world, but everything is made, whether it's a book or a magazine or what have you. And the example here where you were talking about fine craftsmanship, the idea that, these are cut with a 5-axis CNC machine, a highly technical piece of kit, but then they're finished by hand. It's pretty remarkable the level of technology that is almost invisible in that stand, and a lot of those things would only be possible with that technology, but you can't tell.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about why is timber so approachable? Why do you respond so positively to it? And I think it's a combination of two things. It's the fact that especially when I'm thinking more as a craftsman, you've got this timber that is usually older than I am. It's been on the planet for longer than I am, and when you look at the grain, there's a life in the grain. You can read the life of the tree, so you can see summer growth, you can see winter growth, you can see where branches grew. You can, if you look closely, you can see which were lean years and which were plentiful years in the growth of the tree. So each piece is different, and Luke was talking about how the timber works, and each piece works differently, and it works differently because of the idiosyncrasies of that specific tree. And I think that kind of natural sense is visible in each piece of material, and I think that's what we respond to. And even when you don't specifically know how to work the timber, you can sense that this is a natural product, and it's something that as humans we've been associating with for a long time. So to be able to bring that, which is typically associated with the home environment, into other environments where we're really spending a lot more of our time, I think there's, a lot of opportunity to come out of that.
And there is a lot of research, isn't there, Rod, about the benefits of introducing timber into the workplace?
There's a huge amount of research. I mean, we haven't actually done any ourselves, but we've drawn on research from around the world, and particularly in Japan and Canada. And, there have been studies looking at the productivity of students in schools where there is wood in the classrooms and then classrooms without any wood, and how there's far more productivity in those wooden ones. And there's an example that I always find quite amusing, which is the Tesco supermarket in the UK. Their highest grossing store is in, I'm not sure where, but it's in a timber building. And they say it's because our customers spend more time in this one than any other one, and perhaps because they want to be there. Maybe it's because the shelves are organised in a difficult way or something, but I think I'd like to say it's because it's a timber building and people want to be inside it. They feel an affinity towards it. So, but certainly that warmth, as Adam says, it's something we associate with home. If we can take that to the workplace, it makes us feel more comfortable, it makes us want to be there, and we'll be more productive as a result.
I want to touch on the importance of collaboration within the space, and how that was how that's encouraged, and also the reusability or the flexibility of use that is encouraged within the space.
The collaboration is pretty amazing. Here you have a great product, which is the timber. You have a great team here, people making, designing. And the key thing about collaboration is respect, really, and understanding that everyone's at the top of their game and what they do is right. And there were challenges, for sure. And as I said, I learnt a lot about what you can't do. But we got there in the end, and it's a pretty amazing space. There we are, all talking and still getting along. It's that level of respect and going, okay, you know what you're doing, I'll take your advice, what do you think about this? It's really enjoyable, and that comes right back to Rod and his team.
I'd add to that and just say that I'm absolutely blown away by the level of commitment to this project. There was a very, very short lead time for reasons out of our control, which I won't get into. But I know that we've worked many times with Luke and Louise at Evostyle, and we've worked with Marcus and with Adam before, and we've never been let down here. In fact, I would say they over-deliver. And it is just such a joy to work with this team on this collaboration, and I've had absolutely no doubts about its outcome at all. In fact, when I saw the stand for the first time on Wednesday evening, I came in here, I was really completely blown away by seeing it. It was way bigger and way better than I could ever have imagined. So it's been a fantastic team. And I think it's really a testament to the individuals involved, but also to the sort of work ethic here in Australia, the design, manufacturing, workmanship, attention to detail, professionalism has been just fantastic. I work installations like this, I do with designers and manufacturers in many other parts of the world, and I can safely say that here in Australia it is absolutely the top of the game. It really is.
One of the things that we did focus on and still are focused on is creating something, and it comes back to the sustainable approach to this, is to create an exhibition space, a stand which has more than a life for 3 days.
That was my next question. Go on.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so I think, when I was approached and they told me that Evostyle was going to be manufacturing, I was actually pretty intimidated, because it's sort of being handed the keys to a Ferrari, basically. They're sort of, the best manufacturers in Australia, and, I've got to design something that really pushed their abilities to, the limit. But when you do something like that and they work so hard to deliver something like that, they've built it to a standard that could last for many, many years. So I think that, there's really a responsibility to find a life beyond the 3 days of Denfair, especially given how much sort of work and, blood, sweat and tears went into it. So it's going to be touring around, Rod? Is it? Yeah.
Certainly will be. I mean, I can't give you any specifics at this point, but this is not a one. It's not going to be dismantled to turn into firewood. That's for sure. You know, trade shows have actually a terrible environmental footprint in general, and you know, here we are promoting a material that is sustainable, so we need to do something sustainable with it. And this is going to be seen again and again in Australia, and it'll probably end up being shipped overseas as well. But this is not a single-use installation at all.
What's the carbon footprint?
Thank you for that, Marcus. Yeah, the carbon footprint, well, it's actually interesting. This is something I did want to get across. It's two things here. I mentioned earlier about the resource is growing faster than it's being harvested. But so we now look at replacement rates. So all the wood, all of the red oak used to build the stand, it was roughly a little bit less than 3 cubic meters of red oak was used to build the stand. And that would be replaced through natural growth in the forest in America in 3 seconds. So sort of get your heads around that. You know, this is an enormous forest growing all the time. And then in terms of carbon footprint, the stand as it is here today is storing roughly 2 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And without doing a full calculation, we estimate that it's probably carbon neutral. We know for certain that the wood, when it was shipped all the way to Melbourne from the United States, would have arrived here as carbon negative. Because there's way more CO2 equivalent locked in the material than is emitted through all of the process of getting it here.
One thing I'd like to ask as we sort of begin to wind down is something that each of you took away from the project. I mean, it's an opportunity to play with the material that you've maybe had little experience with before. Is there anything that you learnt that you might have prototyped and sort of stored for use later on?
I mean, for me, it was just a playground, so I was able to just try everything I could. So I went to town. It was, you know, all the details. I'm hoping I can find clients who are happy to give it a go on larger projects. The stools which were created were designed for the first time for this stand. You know, haven't been used before, haven't been seen before. I'm hoping to develop them as a product. You know, working with Adam from Modernest, who did the Danish papercord weaving on the seats. You know, a traditional skill. You know, it was just I got to do everything. It was great.
For you, Luke?
I think from a manufacturer's point of view, you know, and our company in particular, we really do take a lot of care about the type of product that we use. So we, if the opportunity's there, want to use something that's really environmental. We don't use any, we avoid using any sort of rainforest timbers, and that's one of the reasons why we love being so associated with American hardwoods, because the story of where they come from and the small family properties that supply our timber, and they don't even do anything, it's just growing and replacing itself. It's important for us. So I was really happy to get involved with the red oak, and I guess from here on I'll be suggesting it and trying to push it forward and as an alternative to other timbers, you know, because why wouldn't you use it? It's perfect. It's a perfect material.
I'm quite looking forward to. I think the table with the tangrams in the middle of it. I am under the impression that might go somewhere to be tested for kind of in a workplace as to how to increase productivity, maybe just relax, which is actually the whole concept of that table, is to go and play and, you know, have something to create. Yeah, so I'm quite looking forward to seeing where that goes. And it was pretty nice to have some type cut at 45-degree angles in timber fins. I've never done that before, so I'll be using that again.
Yeah, that was definitely if you get a chance, go check out the lenticular type that's been cut. I honestly didn't think it was going to work.
No, me either.
Yeah, that was 100% Marcus, and it's brilliant. It's super cool.
Thanks.
Nice. We do have some time for some questions, if anyone would like to ask these guys a few before they go.
The question was about moisture content and the thermally modified red oak.
Yeah, that's correct.
So the process of thermal modification, it takes normally kiln-dried timber, which is at a sort of 10-12% moisture content, depending on where it is. And here in Melbourne, it's a little bit higher. But it then puts it into a vacuum kiln, raises the temperature beyond the point of combustion, but hopefully it doesn't catch fire because it's in a vacuum. And the resultant moisture content of the end product would be about 2 to 4%. So the process actually collapses the cells in the timber. It makes it more durable, it gives it more dimensional stability, and it does increase brittleness. That's one sort of side effect, but with careful design, that's not necessarily an issue.
Oh, that's great, thanks.
You can see in the joints on the edge of the stand, I got some pretty tight. I really pushed it in terms of dimension, and it seems to be going okay. So it's not too bad.
It survived the 3 days. So. Anyone else? No one? Okay, well, we might leave it there for today. Thanks, guys, for having a chat with us today. And please make sure you do check out the stand because it's really cool. I'm probably going to go there and charge my phone. You can do that, can't you? You can charge your devices. You can take a seat.
Wirelessly or in a plug.
Ooh, very, very. The future is now. Thank you to all the guys, to Rod, Marcus, Luke, and Adam for having a chat today. And yeah, you're a big hand.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Sandra.
you.